First, I ran from a husband who tried to drown our child. Now I'm being hunted by surveyors, ghosts, and something even darker wearing his face. What started as escape has turned into war, and I don't know if I'll survive it this time. They say your life flashes before your eyes when you're dying. But for me, it all hit the moment I slipped out the back of that chapel, my ivory dress sweeping through the dust, my heart pounding in my chest as I ran for the first time in my life. The town believed I was marrying well, Judge Montgomery's daughter, tied to Ambrose Clary, a man with spotless hands and a mouth full of poison. But what they called a wedding, I called a prison sentence. So I ran. And if anyone ever asks why, don't say it was love I was escaping. Say it was the air, say it was the breath of freedom, of survival, pulling me forward. My dress hem caught on the barbed wire like the world itself was trying to hold me back, ripping as if it knew exactly what I was doing. Dust settled on my satin gown, a warning of what was to come. I didn't look back, not at the chapel, not at the man who stood there, frozen, waiting for me to return. I wasn't running from love. I was running toward life. I'd never belonged in that world. While other girls sipped tea and practiced smiles, I rode bareback and studied stolen maps. My father ruled our town like a god with a gavel, and I was currency. Ambrose was the deal. But I wasn't running from love. I was running to breathe. The prairie opened up in front of me, wild and vast. No path, no plan, just a way. Coyotes cried in the distance. The wind whispered things I tried not to understand. By nightfall, I found water, drank like a wild thing, and collapsed under a cottonwood tree. Heart still racing, soul finally quiet. I dreamt of fire, of feathers and smoke, of hands holding mine, not grasping, but holding with a strange reverence. There was a language in that dream, one I didn't speak but understood completely. And a name, soft as the wind sighing through leaves, Lakota. I woke up with tears on my cheeks and a shiver that had nothing to do with the morning chill. Across the plains, or maybe just across the landscape of my sleeping mind, I felt a presence. A man. Kneeling by a fire, hair dark as midnight, eyes like sharp pieces of the night sky. He was a warrior, I knew it. But there was more. A dreamer. Marked. And in his quiet solitude, he saw me. Running. A woman in white, framed by smoke and shadow. My face, clear to him, though my name was not. He felt the vision like a physical blow. A calling. He didn't speak of it. He thought destiny was forged in battle, loud and undeniable. But maybe, just maybe, it could be found in silence, in a stranger's eyes seen across vast distances. The sun hovered low, throwing red fire across the rock and dust. I felt more exposed than a snake on hot iron, yet I couldn't tear my eyes off the rider. I swallowed. If you're flesh and bone, say something. The wind hissed over the ridge. Nothing from him, just that quiet, uncanny stillness. A shiver crawled my spine. I tried again, louder. You the one who keeps shouting in my skull? He eased a gloved hand from the reins, palm open, calm as dusk. Not a threat. Not yet. Fine, I muttered, forcing my boots forward. Talk with your silence, see if I care. He waited while I closed the gap. 8 paces, maybe 7. My pulse hammered so hard I tasted copper. Up close, the horse looked half spirit, paint hide dappled with dust, ears twitching but steady. The man's eyes were the dark of river stones, tracking every twitch of my torn dress. I lifted my chin. I ain't property. Not my father's, not Ambrose's, not yours. A flicker crossed his face, something like approval. He pointed toward the west, a slow gesture, then curled 2 fingers, beckoning. You want me to follow? Why should I trust you? Again, no words, only a long, slow look at my cracked lips and shaking hands. He reached into a pouch, brought out a flat strip of dried meat, held it out. Pride said, Don't take it. Survival slapped pride hard. I snatched the venison, chewed. Salt burned the cracks in my mouth, tasted like a promise I didn't dare believe. He dismounted with the care of a man stepping onto holy ground. Close, I saw the years in his face, lines around the eyes, sun-dark skin, a single thin scar at his jawline. He offered the reins. "Horse wants you," I said, half jest, half fear. He shook his head once, firm. The gesture said the beast would obey. I swung up, wincing when my boot split wider. He walked beside us, boots crunching gravel. Every few steps his gaze slid to the horizon, like he expected devils to ride out of the light. We descended into the valley, silence thick as tar. My thoughts scratched loud. "Who are you? Why me?" He didn't answer. Maybe he couldn't. Eventually, hunger edged out caution. "Got a name?" I asked, mouth full of dust. A heartbeat passed, two, then a single word flooded my skull, clear as church bells. "Lakota." I jolted, almost dropped the reins. "So I ain't crazy." He glanced up, one corner of his mouth pulling a fraction, almost a smile, almost. "All right, Lakota," I said. "Name's Clara. You probably knew that." A bitter laugh slipped. Seems everyone else does. We pushed through waist-high sage. Coyotes barked far off. The sky bled purple. My legs trembled from exhaustion, but the horse kept a steady lope. I kept stealing looks at him. Noticed how he scanned ravines, checked wind, read signs I couldn't see. It felt like riding beside the prairie itself. Where we headed? No reply. That weight in my head stirred again. Images this time. A night camp. Stars like spilled flour. Safety. "Fine by me," I muttered. "Long as it ain't back toward town." We reached a shallow wash. He took my hand, steadying me off the saddle. His palm was calloused, warm. For a second, the world shrank to that contact. Then he let go, stepped back, almost apologetic. Camp went up quick, small fire, rocks wind-braked, horse hobbled close. He passed me a canteen. I drank greedy, water dripping down my throat like mercy. Moon climbed, sparks drifted. The smell of cedar filled the dark. My eyelids drooped, but questions gnawed. "I heard you before I saw you," I said. "In my dreams first, then awake." "How?" He sat cross-legged, eyes on the fire, hands still. Then, softly, the thought, "Old way." My people spoke without tongues long before the railroad. I stared. "So I'm what? Tuned to your signal?" Spirit calls spirit, drifted back. I called. You answered. My gut twisted. "I didn't come 'cause of magic. I came 'cause a man was gonna own me." A shadow crossed his features. "No one owns you." Neither of us spoke aloud for a while. Fire popped. Somewhere an owl hooted. "You speak any regular words?" I asked, voice small. His shoulders tensed, then relaxed. He scooped a line of ash, drew a symbol, 2 crossing paths, then wiped half of it away. Finally, in a low, rough whisper, like gravel dragged over steel, he forced out, "Only when needed." The sound hit me square, raw and intimate. My chest tightened. "That hurt you?" He nodded once. Closed lips, breathed through his nose. "Vow," came the feeling. Speech when heart breaks. I swallowed hard. "You broke it, for me." He looked up, eyes reflecting flame. The answer was there without words. Yes. I wrapped my arms around myself, chilled despite the fire. "Folks been taking pieces of me my whole life. You give me something instead. Silence. Choice." His gaze held steady. Not pity, respect. Wind shifted. Cinders spiraled. He rose, scanned the dark east ridge. The horse nickered soft. I whispered, "Someone coming?" He unslung the bow, knocked an arrow. The motion was water smooth. He pointed, 2 fingers, then the ground. Stay. I bristled. I can pull a trigger same as any man. He hesitated, then handed me a spare knife. Bone handle, edge wicked. I nodded, palms sweating. Minutes crawled, nothing but wind. He relaxed, replaced the arrow. Coyote flickered through my head, a brief picture of loping shapes. I exhaled long. Wish my heartbeat had known that. He returned to the fire, crouched. In shadows his voice came again, rough but sure. Rest. That single word held more care than a dozen vows at the altar I'd fled. I lay on my blanket, knife in hand, staring at stars so sharp they might cut me open. My thoughts churned. Father's wrath, Ambrose's grin, the way Takakota's silence felt safer than any walls. Sleep crept close, but fear kicked. If I close my eyes, promise you'll still be here? 1 beat, 2. Then a soft always brushed my mind, warm as embers. I let the darkness take me. Morning cracked the sky open like an egg, spilling light across the valley in slow streaks of fire and gold. I blinked hard, half expecting to wake up back in that chapel, corset biting, father pacing, Ambrose waiting with teeth too white and eyes too dead. But no. There he was. Takakota, crouched low by the fire pit, coaxing life from coals with practiced ease. His horse was already saddled, reins looped over a stump like they'd been waiting all night. He looked up, nodded once. Something in my chest unclenched. I sat up wincing. My legs were stiff. My boots, cracked and stubborn, refused to go on easy. I hissed, muttered a curse. He heard, didn't say a word. Just knelt beside me, took the boot from my hand, cut leather from his own gear, and started wrapping my feet like he was gentling a colt. His hands were strong, sure, calloused. No unnecessary motion, no show of kindness, just the kind that counts. Thank you, I murmured, voice hoarse. He gave a small nod, touched 2 fingers to his brow, a gesture older than language. Welcome, respect, maybe something more. We broke camp quiet, just the whisper of coals dying and the rustle of saddle leather. When he offered a hand to help me mount, I took it. This time, he swung up behind me, one arm around my waist, solid, present, no heat, no hunger, just steadiness. That simple touch steadied something in me, too. The ride was slow, gentle. The prairie rolled out in every direction like a question with no answer. The horse's hooves thunked against dry earth. Birds called overhead. Wind played in my hair. And somewhere inside me, that voice, the one I used to silence to survive, whispered something new. This might be real. I stared at the horizon, voice soft. Why me? You walked between, his thought came, soft as smoke. Drifted back, refused chains. Spirit listens to that. Spirit better keep listening, I muttered. Ambrose ain't the quitting kind. Takakota didn't reply, but his arm shifted, tightened. Not possessive, protective. A silent let him come. That almost made me smile. Almost. See, I'd known danger my whole life. Men with hands too quick, words too sweet, promises like shackles. But this wasn't danger. This was choice. For the first time, I wasn't being led. I was riding beside someone who'd rather walk into fire with me than put a leash on my soul. The sun climbed. Light pooled across the grasslands, warming the chill from our bones. I watched shadows shrink as the day stretched wide, wide like the future. I ain't used to choosing my own path, I said finally. Feels like stepping into sky with no ground. He looked out at the horizon. The earth holds, was all he sent. Simple. But somehow, enough. I shifted back against him. Judge Montgomery thought he owned my story. Ambrose thought he'd written the ending. They were both wrong. His breath touched my neck. You write now. Ahead, the prairie shimmered. Endless, merciless, beautiful. Somewhere out there were storms, bandits, hunger, maybe worse, the kind of life that broke soft women and turned hard men into ghosts. But I wasn't soft anymore, and I sure as hell wasn't dead. I looked back once, just once. The valley behind us was still. No smoke, no pursuit, no ghosts, only the hush of a land that had let me go without a fight. My voice came out rough. Let's see where the earth ends. Lakota nudged the horse forward with a quiet cluck, and we rode. Two silhouettes stitched together by silence. Two people not saved, not broken, just trying. And somewhere, deep in the soil or the sky or whatever passed for fate in this world, I hoped someone was watching. Because if this was justice, I wanted it recorded. If it was ruin, I wanted it chosen. Either way, I was done being someone else's story. Let the frontier write mine. I scrambled to my feet, heart hammering. Was it him, or was I truly losing my mind? I pushed forward, spurred by that impossible silent name. Up a ridge, scanning the horizon. And then I saw him. A figure on horseback, silhouetted against the bleeding sky. My blood ran cold. Search party? Had they somehow already tracked me this far? But he wasn't dressed like my father's men. No black coats, no polished boots, just a lone rider sitting motionless on a painted horse. Regal. A bow across his back, eagle feathers tied in his dark hair. Even from this distance, I felt the weight of his gaze, intense, ancient. I wanted to run, instinct screaming at me to disappear, but I couldn't. The dream, his name in my head, something held me there, rooted to the spot. He didn't move, just watched, waiting. Trembling, I took a step down the ridge, then another, and another. Into the valley floor, stopping about 10 paces from him. The wind carried the silence between us, thin and fragile. He didn't speak. Of course not. He had taken a vow. I didn't know that then. But even without words, I felt him, felt the question in his eyes, felt the knowing. He looked at me, at my ripped dress, my dusty face, my wild hair. He looked at me, and I felt seen in a way I never had been before. And then I heard the words again, not in the air, but echoing in my mind, clear as if he'd shouted them. You are far from where you belong. It startled me, the same voice from the dream, the same voice that had spoken my name. Was this real? Was this what marked meant? I looked into his face, saw the quiet strength, the depth of his gaze. I didn't hear malice. I didn't feel malice, just a profound understanding. I don't belong there, I thought back, a surge of defiance going through me. Not anymore. He gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod, as if he already knew that too. We rode together in silence, the rest of that day, him leading, me following. He guided me through paths I couldn't see, trails known only to the land and its oldest inhabitants. He offered me water from a skin pouch, dried venison, tough and unfamiliar, but food. We didn't speak. He didn't speak. But the silence wasn't empty. It was full of him, full of the vastness around us, full of the strange connection that had pulled me here. When night fell, we camped under a sky thick with stars. A small fire danced between us. I looked at him across the flames. What's your name? I thought, focusing my intent, trying to reach that place in my mind where I'd heard him before. A feeling returned. Not words exactly, but a story. A name felt more than heard. Lakota. Friend to everyone. I'm Clara, I offered silently. Though my family would say I've disgraced that name. He looked at me then, a long, searching look. A name does not decide who you are. Your path does. The thought was gentle, firm. I slept deeply that night. Not because I felt entirely safe, the wild was still the wild, but because, for the first time in days, I wasn't utterly alone. I had found the source of the voice in my head, and somehow he had found me. The moon climbed high, silvering the sea of grass. The night carried no smells of smoke or iron, only wild sage, distant river, the raw scent of earth still cooling after a long day in the sun. We'd staked the horses under a knoll, spread blankets by the coals of a small juniper fire. Sparks floated up like tiny prayers. Takakota's face glowed ember red, unreadable. I felt the urge to break the hush, but feared the weight of my own voice. The silence finally cracked when I sighed. Funny, isn't it? I came out here to breathe and somehow forgot how. His eyes lifted. The quiet answer drifted into my thoughts. Breathe now. Trying. The word caught. My fingers worried a loose thread on my blanket. Back home, they said a lady should keep her hands soft. These hands? I held them to the firelight. Raw, split, smudged with pitch. Don't look like they'll ever be soft again. He studied the blisters, then reached across the flames, took my wrist. His thumb brushed the rough skin. No judgment, only a calm acceptance that jarred me more than any sermon. He pulled a small tin from his pouch, twisted the lid, scooped out pine salve, and worked it gently into each cracked knuckle. Heat flickered in my chest, something between gratitude and alarm. Why so gentle with me? My voice trembled. You barely know what I am. He met my gaze. Know enough. A single pulse of thought, deep as the ground under us. You think you do. I swallowed. Maybe I don't yet. He capped the tin, then sat back, elbows on knees, scanning the dark as though words had weight that might draw trouble. The prairie breathed with us, one long shared inhale. My skin still tingled where he'd touched it. A sudden coyote cry ripped the hush. The horses stamped. Takakota's hand went to the knife at his hip, but he didn't rise. I flinched anyway, heart kicking my ribs. Nerves! I laughed, shaky. That sound used to make me think of bedtime stories. I hugged my knees. Now it sounds like something hunting. He tossed a scrap of jerky into the fire. An offering, maybe. His thoughts brushed mine. Everything hunts. Even us. That truth tasted like river water in a drought. I turned to the sky. Stars look close enough to steal tonight. He followed my gaze, but said nothing. Stillness pressed in until my own voice startled me. Tell me how those two stars find each other. His breath eased out slow, as though measuring memories. When he spoke aloud, softer than the night but real, the sound startled me. In the beginning, he rasped, throat unused. Sky was dark. I stared. That scratchy voice held ancient cadence, rough but melodic. He kept going, halting, as though dragging English from a place that hurt. Two souls burned together, one flame. Spirits cut them apart, scattered across time. Every turn of the world they look, remember only the ache. When they meet, choice wakes. Walk same path, or break again. My mouth went dry. How many times have they failed? Many. The single word rasped like flint against stone. And if they finally hold on? He glanced at me, the fire showing a small, sad curve to his lips. Then sky changes. A stray ember popped. Wind sighed through the grass like an audience too big for the prairie. I found myself leaning closer, voice low. What if the sky doesn't want to change? His jaw flexed. The thought slid between my ears. Sky must learn. But some things feel bigger than us. I shook my head. Like my father's law, like Ambrose's anger. The flint edge of his voice returned. Law is just fear wearing Sunday clothes. I huffed a brittle laugh. Wish I'd seen that sooner. He tilted his head, studying me. Warmth throbbed, a silent question. Do you still fear? Every second. I gripped the blanket, but it beats choking on satin. He nodded once, as though fear were a tool, something sharp but useful. The hush settled again. Bats flickered past the fire glow, silent but for faint clicks. I drew a breath, bracing. You keep searching the dark like it owes you something. What's out there? His shoulders tightened. He pointed east, where a faint ridge cut the stars. Whispered inside my skull, memory. I frowned. Your people? A place, he croaked aloud. Old. Broken. He absently touched the medicine pouch at his chest. We go there. Because of me? My voice fell, the notion felt heavy. Because... Path. He coughed, the effort plain. Then, softer inside my head. You dream. I see. Same place. That rocked me. So I'm not just following you, you're following dreams I brought? He stared at the coals. Dreams choose both. A log collapsed into sparks, sending heat across our faces. I tasted ash. Then let's find this place and see what it wants. He dipped his chin, acceptance plain. The pact felt sealed without a single handshake. We banked the fire, lay side by side with a cautious gap between. Night insects droned like a distant choir. My eyes drooped, but nerves pricked. What if I wake and you're gone? I murmured. His response came not in words, but sensation, solid, earth-heavy assurance. I will not leave. For the first time in days, sleep took me quick and deep. Dawn bled orange across the plains. Cold gnawed my bones. Lakota already crouched by the ashes, coaxing flame. He glanced over. The faintest smile flickered. You watch me sleep? I yawned. He shrugged once, handed a tin cup of hot water flavored with sage. Steam curled between us like a living thing. I sipped, hissed at the bitterness. He stood, stretched, scanned the horizon. Every move revealed lean muscle, silent grace. I felt small and loud beside him. We broke camp fast. I tried to mount alone. Pain shot through my raw hands. Without comment, he boosted me, then swung up behind. His chest brushed my back, steady, heart beating slow as a drum in fog. I stiffened, then let myself lean into that drum. He guided the paint horse west, through tall grass that hissed against stirrups. Far off, antelope darted like pale ghosts. Hours melted, my lids drooped. His arm circled my waist when I swayed, the gesture instinctive, protective. We crested a low saddle, and the land opened into a basin. Miles of rippling gold, framed by distant red bluffs. He halted, dismounted, offered me an arm down. This it? I whispered. He nodded. Spirit plains. I breathed deep. Even the air felt weighty, as though 1,000 stories breathed back at me. He led on foot, guiding the horse with slack reins. I matched his pace. We came to a canyon mouth, walls painted with fading ochre symbols, buffalo, spirals, figures touching the sky. I brushed a fingertip over one. Your ancestors? He placed his palm beside mine, almost touching. All ancestors. Inside the canyon, sound changed. Each step echoed like church halls. Sunlight bounced off quartz veins, throwing shards of color. I shivered, not from cold. A shadow flicked at the corner of my eye. I spun, heart clenching. Nothing but rock and light. Thought I saw... My voice dried up. He tensed, breathed in, lips moving silent. Then thought spoke. Land watches. Friendly? A pause. Depends who we are. That answer coiled inside me. We pressed deeper. At a bend, bones littered the dust. Deer, maybe elk, picked clean, bleached white. I knelt, fingers trembling. My whisper sounded too loud. Something died hard. He crouched opposite, touched a skull. circle of life, drifted. But unease flitted across his face. We made camp on a sandy bench by dusk. No fire, at his request. Smoke carries tales, he rasped. We ate cold jerky, drank from a seep oozing between stones. Night fell heavy, stars pin-sharp. I couldn't settle. The canyon felt too still. At last I murmured, "You expect trouble?" His jaw flexed. Maybe. A wave of grief rolled off him, sharp, sudden. "Tell me," I urged. Silence. Then he reached for me, finger tracing the scar on his jaw. Inside my head flashed an image. Soldiers, flames, screams, a woman running with a baby, him through smoke. My breath hitched. "That happened here," I said, voice breaking. He closed tired eyes, nodded. I touched his forearm. "You brought me to the place you lost everything." His pulse jumped under my fingers. A thought flickered. "And where I found you." I didn't understand, but the tenderness in that idea hollowed my chest. "We'll make it right," I whispered. He opened his mouth, then froze, head snapping east. I heard it too, gravel crunch, faint but close. My heart thundered. He pushed me behind a slab, knocked an arrow, body a taut wire. Footsteps approached. Two shadows materialized, figures in dust coats, rifles slung. One spat, voice low. "Tracks end here. Girl can't be far." My guts turned to ice. Father's men? Bounty hunters? I glanced at Lakota. His eyes burned black fire. The other man grunted. "Boss said bring her alive. That Injun? Don't matter." Rage flashed through Lakota, hot, bright. He raised the bowstring, but I touched his arm, mouthing wait. The men stepped closer, footprints crunching. My pulse roared. I clutched the knife at my belt, though my hands shook. First man muttered, "Trail's cold." He turned, spit again. "We'll circle south." Seconds stretched. Footsteps faded. Silence flooded back, thick, throbbing. I slumped, breath shuddering. He eased the bow, but his jaw stayed iron. He whispered, voice a warning stone. "More will come." I nodded, adrenaline burning. "They want me. Maybe you too." His gaze locked mine. Choice finds us now. The old fear tried to worm in, but another feeling swelled. Fierce, untamed. Then we choose together. I sheathed the knife. "Let 'em chase. We'll write a story they regret." A spark lit in his eyes, half pride, half sorrow. He extended his hand. Rough skin, steady grip. I took it. Under the weight of watching stars and ancestral stone, we stood bound by a vow unspoken. Meet whatever hunted us, shoulder to shoulder, hearts beating the same war drum. And somewhere beyond the canyon walls, hoofbeats began to echo. Whether they belonged to ghosts or men, justice or vengeance, none could say yet. But the spirit plains listened, ready to decide the truth. "What troubles you?" I thought, my own unease stirring. "This land has memory," his thought echoed back, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "And not all memories are kind." I wanted to ask more, but his presence held a stillness, a gravity that stopped me. I followed him deeper, trusting him, always trusting him. He led me to a place, not a village, just the ghosts of one. Fallen totems, scorched earth, bones. My stomach twisted. Lakota dismounted, his presence heavy with sorrow, walking through the ruins like a mourner. What happened here? I thought, my voice barely a whisper in the silence. My mother's people, he shared, images flashing in my mind. Fire, soldiers, running figures. Many winters ago, soldiers came, said the land was theirs. My mother ran with me, a baby, in her arms. I knelt beside him, touching the edge of a broken clay bowl. Ash coated my fingers. "Why come back?" He turned to me then, his gaze intense. "Because this is where I saw you. My breath caught. In the vision? He gave a small nod. This is where we are meant to begin. I didn't understand what he meant. Not fully. Begin what? But I trusted the truth in his presence more than any logic. That night, we lit no fire. He conveyed that the wind here carried more than sound. It carried memory. We slept under the stars, the ground beneath us humming with something ancient. Dawn broke with the sound of hoofbeats. Not Takakota's horse, not far. I scrambled up, heart pounding. Takakota was already awake, crouched low, bow in hand, scanning the ridgeline. 3 riders, silhouetted by the sun. My stomach dropped. Ambrose. Even from this distance, I saw the glint of silver spurs, the cruel set of his jaw. He didn't come alone. 2 of my father's hired men, rifles. Takakota didn't move. They found me, I whispered. How? Track. Smoke. And hate, his thought was sharp. The riders stopped. Ambrose dismounted with a flourish. Darlin', his voice carried on the wind, cutting into the silence. I had a feeling you'd run off somewhere romantic, though I'll admit, this one's more savage than I expected. I stepped in front of Takakota. I'm not going back with you. Ambrose laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. You don't get to decide that, Clara. Your daddy's been raising hell. You're his property, and mine, soon as that marriage license gets inked. Takakota's presence flared, sharp and protective. She is no one's property, he conveyed. Ambrose tilted his head. Is that right? You aiming to die for a woman who doesn't belong to you either? Takakota's thoughts narrowed, his bow slowly rising. She belongs only to herself. Ambrose spat. Well, I can't let you ride off into the sunset with my bride, now can I? A gunshot ripped through the air. Takakota moved, pushing me down, rolling away as the second man aimed. His arrow flew, silent, deadly, striking the man's shoulder. The other hired hand fired wildly. I crawled behind a half-burnt tree, watching Takakota move like a ghost, like a wolf, fast, silent, relentless. Ambrose yelled, "Shoot him! Kill that savage!" But Takakota was a blur of motion. It was over fast, one man down, the other clutching his bleeding shoulder. Ambrose stood frozen, disbelief on his face. You won't get away with this, he hissed. The law of my father. I stood up, dust clinging to my dress. You think the law protects men like you because it was written by men like your father. But this place doesn't belong to you, and neither do I. Ambrose reached for a hidden pistol. Takakota's presence was sudden, overwhelming. A blade was at Ambrose's throat before the gun cleared the holster. No, Takakota conveyed, his presence low, dangerous. Your story ends here. I looked at him, begging silently with my eyes. Don't kill him. Not for me. Not here. Takakota saw it. His presence softened, just a fraction. He stepped back, the blade lowering. Go, he conveyed to Ambrose. You came chasing what wasn't yours. Now run, and never return. Ambrose hesitated, humiliated, then scrambled onto his horse and fled, a cloud of dust rising behind him. We buried the dead man. The wounded one we left with water, a harsh message carried in his pain. For 2 days, I barely spoke. The fight had drained me, leaving only the ache of reality. You didn't kill him, I finally said, my voice raw. Why? Because your story is not meant to end in vengeance. Takakota's thought was calm. It is meant to begin in freedom. We stood on a ridge, wind in our faces. Below, a river wound through a valley. Untouched, sacred, hidden. A place where no maps reached. I want to stay, I said. Here. With you. He looked at me, his presence asking the unspoken question. You would give up everything you knew? I never had anything real to begin with, I said, the truth settling deep inside me. Except now. Here. Takakota turned fully towards me. His presence was warm as he took my hands in his. Then we walked the path together. There was no kiss, not then. Some things were too sacred. But standing there, under that boundless sky, in the hush of the listening plains, something ancient and unbreakable passed between us. The days in the hidden valley unfolded like a quiet, shared dream. Peace settled on us, deep and unexpected. We didn't need words. Our days found a rhythm: water at dawn, hunting, gathering herbs I was learning to recognize. The wild wasn't a threat anymore. It was home. Lakota taught me to listen, not just with my ears. The land always speaks, he'd convey, his presence calm, but most people have forgotten how to hear it. I learned. I understood the warning in a sudden silence, the meaning in a bird's cry, the wisdom carried on the wind. My old life felt impossibly far away. Each evening by the fire, he'd share stories of his people, legends woven into the land. I'd share memories of my mother, of moments of freedom I'd stolen before duty closed in. In the quiet, we began to unravel, to find ourselves in each other's presence. But even in our sanctuary, the edges of the outside world pressed in. First, a faint trail of smoke on the horizon. Then, broken branches on a trail Lakota hadn't used. And one evening, by the river, a fleeting reflection in the water. A movement. I spun around. Nothing. But the feeling. It lingered. That night, Lakota didn't sleep. He stood watch, his presence a shield, scanning the tree line. I knew. Someone had found us. I should leave, I thought the next morning, wrapping my arms around myself. They're following me. They'll never stop. Lakota turned to me, his presence sharp with something like anger. Not at me. At the suggestion. This land does not belong to them, neither do you. We stay. I nodded, but my unease grew. It wasn't just for me now. It was for him. He had risked everything. Would he have to risk more? At what cost? Later that day, tending the fire, I heard it again. A whisper on the wind. Not words, but a sound that felt deliberate. Too faint to trace. I froze, scanned the trees. Nothing. But the feeling didn't pass. That night, Lakota led me deeper into the woods, to a ring of standing stones, ancient, covered in moss. Sacred. This is where I come when I need to remember who I am, he conveyed. I touched a cool stone, felt an echo of vibration. There is something older than either of us at work. His presence deepened. Something that brought you here, and something that hunts you. I didn't ask him how he knew. Some truths resonated too deep for questions. The next morning, we found the sign. A strip of white silk snagged on a branch near camp. My dress. The torn hem. Lakota studied it, jaw tight. They're close. I knelt, touching the silk. He's not alone, is he? No. We moved fast, gathering what we could. Weapons, water, medicine, dried berries. We didn't speak much, didn't need to. Mounting the horses, a hawk shrieked above, circling north. We rode west. By nightfall, we reached the stone hills. Jagged cliffs, narrow passes. Lakota guided us through a hidden trail, brush concealing the path, stones hiding the entrance. Slow. Treacherous, but safer than open land. Our presences echoed in the canyon. The air grew colder. I huddled close to him, watching shadows dance. Then, just before dawn, hoofbeats, echoing, distant but real. They weren't just close, they were on our trail. Lakota urged the horses faster. The trail widened. We galloped, wind tearing past. Behind us, the sound grew louder, closer. I felt their presence bearing down, hot, relentless, and then a crack. Not thunder, not a gun. The earth groaned. Lakota pulled the horses to a stop, just in time. Before us, a chasm, a landslide, fresh earth crumbling into the darkness. A trap? An accident? We turned. 3 riders emerged from the shadows, rifles drawn. Ambrose, hat low, that sneer. But his eyes, not just fury now, something else. Obsession. "You led us on quite the chase, darling," he drawled. "But I knew you'd run back to your little war-painted protector." Lakota stood in front of me, his presence a shield. "Step aside. She comes with me." "No," I said, stepping forward. "I'm not yours. I never was." Ambrose's lip curled. "You're making this harder than it has to be." Then, one of his men raised a rifle. The shot roared. I screamed. Lakota staggered, fell to one knee, clutching his side. Blood. It happened so fast. My scream. Chaos. A second shot. I moved, grabbed Takakota's bow from the ground. I didn't know how to use it, but the ancestors, they remembered. I pulled the string. The arrow flew, straight, fierce, struck the shooter in the chest. He fell. Ambrose snarled, turned his gun on me. But Lakota was rising, bleeding, yes, but his spirit was fire. With a cry, not of sound, but of pure force that echoed in my very soul, he leapt forward, tackling Ambrose. They wrestled. Dirt. Grunts. Ambrose struck with his pistol butt. Lakota bled. He didn't stop. I screamed his name, not out loud, but inside, a desperate plea. Then silence. Lakota stood. Ambrose didn't. Only one rider left, the younger man, eyes wide. He fled. I rushed to Lakota, helped him sit. Blood. But the bullet had missed anything vital. Weak, but alive. I held him, tears streaming. "You saved me," I whispered. He leaned his forehead against mine, his presence soft. "No. You saved us." The rain came, heavy, cleansing, cold. I sheltered him, his head in my lap, wrapped his wound with strips of my petticoat. His breath was shallow, his grip on my hand didn't falter. I didn't let go. Dawn. Mist clung to the cliffs. I collected rainwater. Changed. Not the bride. Hardened. Sharpened. Sacred. Lakota stirred. "You should have run," his thought was rough. "And leave you to bleed in the dust?" I knelt beside him, smiling through tears. Not a chance. He tried to sit up. "We need to keep moving. No one's coming," I thought, gently pushing him back down. "Not now. Not yet." He closed his eyes. "They will. The one who fled. He'll bring more. They always do." I knew he was right. But for now, silence. Peace. We had earned it. 3 days. Hidden in the canyon. I boiled roots, fed him, cleaned his wound. I spoke to the land as he'd shown me, asked for strength, felt something. Lakota watched me, pride in his eyes. I wasn't just surviving, I was becoming. 4th day. We moved. Slowly. Lakota behind me, arms around my waist, avoiding open ground, following game trails, heading towards a grove he remembered. Sacred, untouched, but the land felt different, restless. 6th night, camping near willows. I saw it. Carvings. Fresh. On a tree trunk. A crude heart. A+C. My stomach twisted. Ambrose. Lakota touched the bark. He's close. How? I thought, my voice tight. He fell. He was... Not all ghosts stay buried. His thought was like stone. We pressed on. Unease, a cold knot in my chest. I started dreaming of Ambrose again, standing at the edge of firelight. Eyes dark. Hollow. "You'll always be mine." His voice, soft and deadly in the dream. I woke up shivering. End of the week. Takakota's strength returned. He could walk. Hunt. But something was different. The way he watched the woods, touched his medicine pouch. Not just fear, knowing. We reached the grove. Beautiful. Ancient trees, roots like snakes. Flowers, a creek singing, birds, safe, we thought. That night I wandered into the grove alone, needed to breathe, knelt by the creek, cupped water, heard it. A branch, cracking, behind me, frozen, turned, and saw him, Ambrose, thin, wild-eyed, a bandage on his ribs, alive, and smiling. "Hello, darling," he whispered, his voice raspy. "Miss me?" I stumbled back. He lunged, grabbed my arm. I screamed. Takakota crashed through the trees, knife drawn. Ambrose pulled me closer, pistol to my temple. "One more step," he growled, "and she dies." Takakota stopped. Let her go. His presence was a command. Ambrose laughed. "You really don't get it, do you? She's mine. I came all this way to take back what's mine." I looked at Takakota. My pulse roared. He gave a small nod. A promise. I slammed my heel into Ambrose's shin. He cried out, staggered. Takakota moved. Steel, fists, dirt, blood. The grove was violence. I scrambled away. Weapon, a stone, heavy. Ran back. Ambrose had Takakota pinned. I screamed. Struck. The stone hit Ambrose's temple. A sickening crack. He collapsed, not dead, but close. Takakota pulled me into his arms. I sobbed, shaking, hearts shattering, and whole. We left him there. Dawn. At the edge of the grove, hand in hand, watching the light. "We can't keep running," I said softly. Takakota nodded. "Then we make a place where we stand." We looked at each other, knew, whatever came next, together. We didn't go far, a mile west, red cliffs, rolling plains. An old homestead, abandoned, weather-beaten, roof caved, but it stood. I walked inside, touched the wood. Years. It could be ours. We settled. The land welcomed us. River, fish, trees. No sounds of pursuit, just birdsong, wind. Takakota fixed things. Hunted. I patched the roof, cleaned, sewed curtains, evenings, soft voices over stew, stars, peace, and in that peace, something bloomed. I felt it first, a flutter, life, inside me, waited days, by the creek, washing clothes, water lapped. Takakota was humming, a wordless melody. I turned. "I think we're going to have a child." He stopped, stood, water dripping, looked at me like seeing light for the first time. That child, his thought was thick with emotion, with wonder, will never have to run. It should have ended there. Frost cracked under our boots as we followed that blood-stitched trail, steam puffing from the horse like a furnace. The carcass was still warm, ribs split by something too clean for claws. I crouched, fingers hovering over the hoofprints, deep, deliberate, pacing a circle like a preacher round a pulpit. Takakota squinted at the sky, face carved from stone. "Not predator," whispered the thought in my skull. Warning. I wiped cold sweat off my neck. "Who leaves fresh kill to rot, feels staged." He laid a palm on the prints, then on the wound in the deer's flank. Straight slice, no tearing. A blade, not teeth. He rose, wiped red on his trousers, signed to the trees like asking permission, then turned for home. The silence thickened as daylight died. I bolted shutters, dropped bars across both doors. Inside, the cabin felt suddenly small. Smoke from the hearth stung my eyes. I stirred stew that neither of us wanted. "Could be bounty hunters," I muttered, forcing calm. Some twisted warning. He shook his head, motioned a line across his throat. Ambrose. The thought hissed like a snake in brittle grass. My stomach knotted. I watched him fall, heard the crack of his skull. Hate stands back up, Takakota sent, grim as a tomb. He knelt beside the hearth, fed cedar to the flames. Still, the chill clung. Night howled. Every timber creak sounded like boots on the porch. Sleep came in tatters. When dreams did rise, Ambrose stalked them, mouth stitched shut with wire, eyes sugared by moonlight, whispering without sound, always mine. I woke screaming. Takakota crouched by the door, knife resting across his knees. He didn't speak, only glanced at me with eyes that said he'd heard the dream too. "They're not dreams anymore," I whispered, throat raw. He stared at the latch, thought voice cold iron. "Something walks." Day after day, prints multiplied, one pair, heavy-heeled, tracing the cabin walls like a curse. No tracks led away, only new arrivals, deeper each dawn. Birds fled, squirrels vanished, even wind seemed to sneak by. Then the mark, crudely carved on the front door while we slept. Jagged heart, A inside it, splinters still hanging like scabs. I ran a thumb across the groove, splinters drawing blood. "He's dead," I insisted, voice shaking. I felt life leave him. Takakota lit sage in a shell, fanned smoke over the scarred wood. He dressed in paint and feathers, walked barefoot to the medicine stones at the ridge. Stones older than iron, older than talk. I watched from the doorway, shawl tight, praying in a language I didn't know I knew. He chanted until dusk, voice rolling with thunder that never reached the ground. Smoke climbed, then broke apart on a wind that didn't blow anywhere else. That night, the fire snuffed itself. No hiss, no sputter. Flames simply vanished, embers winking dead in unison. The cabin plunged to black so hard I tasted it. Then came the knocking. Slow, hollow. First on the north wall, then the west, then above our heads like fists beating the rafters. Boards groaned, my breath hitched, hand slid to my belly. Only then did I feel the baby twist, restless at the sound. Takakota stepped in front, blade glinting with ghost light. The knocks stopped. Silence bled into every crack. Hinges squealed. Front door eased inward, though the bar still lay across it. No push, no breeze, just an opening hole of black. Cold so pure it felt wet poured into the cabin. My skin prickled, heart racing. He motioned stay. I shook my head, voice steadier than I felt. "We face this together." I gripped the buffalo bone handle of his spare knife. We stepped onto the frost-silver porch. Moonlight spilled across the prairie, turning every tuft of grass into knives. And there, where our pasture met the wild, stood the figure. Long coat shredded, skin a shade the moon should never touch. Sutured lips stretched in a frozen snarl, hole in his chest glistening dark. Yet the eyes burned, dull copper rage, endless. The air shimmered around him like heat on blacktop, wrong in the cold. Even coyotes refused to howl. I took a breath that scraped the inside of my lungs. "Ambrose," I called, surprise at the calm in my voice. "You should have stayed buried." No response, no twitch, just that stare, as if measuring how much fear he could pour into us before we broke. Takakota stepped forward, bow raised, his thought cut like a razor. "Spirit, be gone." The figure didn't flinch. Takakota spoke aloud, voice carrying the weight of broken vows. "You lost." Nothing. He loosed an arrow. The shaft sailed true, but mid-flight the air warped. It slowed, twisted, fell 5 feet short, rattling in grass. My gut turned ice. I whispered, "You see that?" His jaw tightened. "Not of flesh." The stitched mouth curved into an almost smile, threads creaking. He lifted one arm, palm up, silent invitation. Takakota gripped my hand. "Hold courage." I squeezed back. "I'm done running." We stepped together, closing half the distance. Frost crackled, but I felt heat build under my ribs, fury, grief, the will to defend what was ours. I stopped 10 paces out, raised my voice. "You have no claim here. Not my child, not my life." My words shook the air like a bell. I dragged Takakota's hand over my heart. "We belong to ourselves." Wind roared from nowhere, whipping my hair across my face. The figure wavered, edges blurring like smoke. Desperate, it lurched forward, one slow step, then another, driven by malice stronger than death. Lakota braced. Thought rang like steel. Now. He planted bare feet, pulled my hand to his chest. Heartbeat thundered under my palm. With the other, he raised the knife skyward, blade catching moonlight. He bellowed a word in his tongue, sound like rolling stone. I echoed it, throat raw. Light burst from nowhere, no color, just brightness. The stitched mouth gaped, threads snapping as if screaming. Flesh crumbled to gray flakes, hat toppled empty to the dirt. Then ash dispersed on a wind that suddenly smelled of rain. Silence returned. Real silence, the kind that breathes. Our cabin windows glowed warm. The fire inside had relit itself, orange and alive. My knees buckled. He caught me, lowered us to the grass. Tears came, shock, relief, grief, tangled tight. He stroked hair from my face, thought voice gentle, finished. I laughed, half sob. Think the land agrees? He nodded at the valley. Wind rustled grass like applause. We sat until dawn painted the sky gold. He lifted my hand to his lips. One kiss, light as snow on sage. Words brushed my mind. Life begins again. Sun climbed. We walked back to the porch, fingers entwined. For the first time, fear didn't ride on my shoulder. Inside, the baby kicked, steady drum of new days. I smiled through drying tears. Our child's first dawn without ghosts. Lakota rested a palm on the swell, closed his eyes. Peace radiated, warm as fresh bread. I whispered, "It's over." He opened his eyes, soft with something like hope. "Just beginning," he echoed. Later we watched the prairie catch fire with sunrise colors, hand in hand, ready for whatever wild tomorrow dared to bring, knowing we'd bled, fought, and stood our ground together, and the land had listened. Justice, I learned, doesn't always thunder in on horseback. Sometimes it sighs in the hush after a curse breaks, in the warmth of a morning that truly belongs to the living. Wind rattled the half-fixed shutters, carrying that thin, metallic hiss I kept pretending wasn't there. I'd spent the morning shelling dry beans while Lakota patched the sod roof, but the hush between us felt tight as wire. He dropped from the ladder, wiped sweat with the back of his wrist. I caught his eye, forced a smile. Roof'll hold another storm. His gaze lingered on the distant ridge. Storm's already here, his silence seemed to say. We ate a noon meal of jerky and boiled roots. He tore bread, passed me the bigger piece. My appetite had vanished weeks ago, yet the child insisted. I chewed, heart drumming. That static returned, barely a sound, more a pressure on the teeth. I set the tin cup down. "There, you hear it?" He tilted his head, dark hair shifting in the breeze. A single nod. Coyotes don't hum like wire. I pressed my palm to the swell beneath my ribs. Feels like we're being tuned somehow. He set his knife aside, knelt, touched my belly with careful reverence. The gesture always calmed me, until now. Even his hand shook. "What is it?" My voice cracked. His answer came as a picture in my skull. A hawk circling dead air, feathers ruffled, nowhere to land. I swallowed. "Something wrong with the land?" He rose, scanned the horizon again, jaw clenched. Silence carried more dread than speech. That afternoon I pretended at chores. Every creak of the cabin boards made my shoulders jump. By dusk, I'd had enough. Candle in hand, I told him I needed air and walked beyond the garden, past the fence, toward tall grass that never seemed to lie still. That's when the moonlight hit metal, tiny stakes glinting like buried needles. My breath hitched. I crouched, brushed soil away. Smooth steel, fresh hammered, thin cord threaded through them, marking a line that cut straight across the slope. Whose line? A few yards farther, I found another, and a third. My heartbeat turned to thunder. I followed the markers until I spotted something shoved beneath a limestone ledge, a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. Part of me wanted to run, pretend I'd never seen it. Instead, I knelt, fingers numb, unwrapped layers slick with tar. Folded paper emerged, crisp, precise, an engineer's work, not a rancher's. I unrolled it on the grass, held the candle low. Grid, elevations, directions in tidy block letters. Site Alpha, centered in bold. A neat rectangle marked barracks sat exactly where our cabin stood. Artillery emplacements dotted the valley rim like cold eyes. My stomach lurched, bile stung my throat. Future soldiers tromping where Takakota's stories had floated on kitchen smoke? Field guns shattering the lullaby wind? I almost ripped the sheet, stopped myself, mind clawing for sense. Bootsteps approached, light but urgent. He appeared beside me, bow over shoulder, eyes reflecting the candle flame. I couldn't speak. I just held it out. Paper shook between my fingers. He knelt, stones biting his knees, and read. His shoulders stiffened as though the fort walls already rose around us. Finally, he touched the block letters, Site Alpha, like a man confirming a death warrant. I whispered, "They plan to pave our hearth into parade ground." He looked up. Hurt flickered, then hardened into a calm rage. The thought he pushed into me felt like iron scraping flint. Land was free. Ink says otherwise. I wrapped arms around my middle. We bled for that freedom. How do you fight a pen? He answered aloud, voice low gravel. Ink melts in fire. I shook my head. Blueprints live in more than one place. There'll be copies, surveyors, soldiers. My breath hitched. My father's reach, the army's reach, feels the same now. Too big. He considered, then gestured toward the stakes. We walked the cord, tracing a perfect rectangle that carved the valley like a coffin lid. My candle sputtered in the wind. What if we move deeper west? I asked, hope thin. Find another hollow. His thought replied, they keep coming. Rails, fences, cannons, no edge left. The truth sat heavy. I pictured the future. Steam whistles, telegraph poles marching across grass, our child's first steps falling on ground already claimed. A tremor rippled my belly, tiny feet pressing from within, as though agreeing. Takakota saw the panic on my face. He laid both palms on my cheeks, stared close. A wave of steadiness washed over me, but sorrow lurked underneath. He pressed his forehead to mine. We choose, his mind whispered. Fight or leave. Fight who, exactly? I pulled back, anger flaring. A machine we can't even see? My father wrapped in a uniform? Your ghosts turned to law? Silence answered. I knelt, clenched a fistful of grass. I could torch that map, but the stakes will stay, and men will follow them. Burn the stakes, they hammer new ones. I met his gaze. Run again, we teach this child that home is smoke. He exhaled, walked a slow circle, then slammed his knife into the earth beside a stake, snapping the cord. The line sagged. He cut another, then another, silent vengeance. Woodpecker rhythm echoed across the valley. I should have felt relief. Instead, dread thickened. They'll notice. Come sooner. He yanked the last cord free, came back, wiped the blade on his leggings. Then he touched my stomach, eyes fierce. No one claims this life. Tears blurred my sight. I whispered, then we stand. He gave a short nod. Decision forged, sharp as his knife. We carried the map to the cabin. I laid it across the table while he stoked the hearth. Flame's glow bathed the neat ink in orange. My pulse hammered. I traced the line labeled Road to Railhead. Felt like a vein ready to pump men and steal our way. He set a kettle on the chain, then turned. I expected him to burn the plan. Instead, he folded it small, slid it into a pouch. Why keep it? His voice, ragged but sure. No enemy roads. A lesson from his war-scarred history. Map is weapon too. That night sleep avoided me. Every creak of log or hiss of wind sounded like spurs on the porch. Lakota sat by the fire, sharpening arrowheads, gaze distant. Now and then, he touched the pouch, as though the paper were hot iron needing constant checking. I finally asked, "You blame me?" His head snapped up, eyes wide. He shook it hard, then reached across the floor, took my hand, squeezed until the ache in my chest eased. The thought floated gentle. This place chose us. Ink does not change that. It might. I stared at the fire. Soon as they march in. A heavy pause. Then he whispered aloud, rough with resolve, "We make them bleed for every inch." The ferocity in that promise frightened me more than the stakes. We can't win open war, Lakota. 2 people against... not 2. He gestured toward the dark beyond the window. Land fights. Spirits fight. I shivered. You'd call ghosts to battle? He looked away, jaw clenched. If I must. His faith in forces unseen scared and comforted at once. I thought of the child again. How could I birth a life into smoke and gunfire? Yet running forever seemed worse. The kettle whistled low. He poured hot water over dried mint, carried the cup to me. I cradled it, inhaled bitter steam. Maybe, I breathed. The answer is neither war nor flight. He raised a brow. We tell the world what's here, I said. Make them see it sacred. Hope sparked. Petition the territorial governor. Publish maps calling this land tribal. Force the ink to our side. His silence weighed heavy. Finally he spoke inside my head, voice soft but bleak. White paper rarely favors brown truth. I blinked back tears. Then we need allies who read paper. He considered, gaze on the baby's cradle he'd carved from juniper. After a long silence, he nodded once. A plan, fragile as spider silk, took form in the firelight, but time was already moving against us. Next dawn, hoof prints scarred the flat near the creek, new prints, heavy, shod. Lakota crouched, touched one. Army mounts. How many? My throat tightened. He held up 3 fingers, then pointed to deeper tracks farther back, supply wagon. At least 5 men, probably more to follow. We looked at each other, unspoken countdown ticking. Back at the cabin we packed light. Dried meat, blankets, his bow, my rifle, that cursed map. I lingered on the doorway he'd carved with protective symbols. Running again tasted like defeat, but staying to die would buy nothing for the child. As we saddled the mare, I hesitated. Where to? He lifted my chin, looked long. The answer pressed into my mind like sunrise, north, to the agency. Speak truth. I'd rode past that reservation once, barbed wire, forced peace. He wanted to beg help from folk already chained. Will they even listen? He brushed a strand of hair from my cheek. They will listen to him. A flash of image, older man, beadwork vest, stern eyes, chief who still carried weight with Washington agents. Hope flared, dim but alive. We set off, leaving the cabin smoke curling faint in dawn. Behind us, the valley shimmered gold and innocent. Unaware blue uniforms and surveyors would trample it soon. Half a mile out, I glanced back, saw riders crest the far ridge, sunlight glinting off metal. Too late for farewells. Lakota urged the horse faster. Wind tore my braid loose. Fear clawed my throat, but under it burned something harder. Grit. I pressed a hand to my belly, whispered to the life inside, "Hold on. Your parents are stubborn fools, but we'll carve a place yet." Ahead lay red dust, government outposts, maybe betrayal. Behind, men with blueprints and rifles. Between them, a woman and a silent warrior, armed with a stolen map, and a vow not to bend again. And somewhere in that narrowing path, justice waited, blood-soaked or blessed, we couldn't guess. Only that we would meet it together, eyes open, hearts set on freedom earned the hard way. One breath, one step, one bullet at a time. I sat there, the rough paper trembling in my hands. Site Alpha, our sanctuary, our beginning, planned, measured, designated. My breath hitched. This wasn't some random act of trespass. This was the system, the one I ran from, following me, claiming the wild itself, taking what wasn't theirs, just like Ambrose. But this was bigger, cold, impersonal. Lakota knelt beside me. I didn't need to explain. He saw the map, felt the weight of it, felt the planned violence laid out in neat lines on the paper. His presence was heavy, burdened. He touched the drawing of the fort walls, the lines marking cannons, this sacred land, desecrated before a single shovel hit the earth. We can fight them, I thought, a desperate fierceness rising in me. We fought Ambrose. We fought whatever he became. We can fight this. His presence was quiet, sad. You cannot fight a map, Clara. You cannot fight a line on paper. The cold dread seeped in, filling the space where hope had been moments before. Everything felt hollowed out. The homestead, the peace, the sense of belonging. Was it all just temporary? Were we just squatting on ground already claimed by invisible men with rulers and ink? The dream felt suddenly fragile, susceptible to being erased by straight lines and cold calculations. The land that spoke, silenced by surveyors' chains. The memory of my name, whispered across distance, overwhelmed by coded designations. I looked at Lakota, his silent strength, the deep sadness in his eyes. We had faced down ghosts and gunmen, found freedom in the wild. But the real world, the structured, claiming, categorizing world I'd fled, had found us. And it wasn't asking for permission. It was planning. I clutched the map, the edges sharp against my skin. This changed everything. This wasn't about escape anymore. It was about intrusion. About the relentless march of progress, claiming everything in its path. And we were just in the way. We couldn't stay. Not now. Not with the knowledge that our home was just a marked square on someone's blueprint for war. We left the homestead, quietly, efficiently. Traveled lighter this time. East. Towards the dawn, the way I'd come. But slower now. Cautious. The land felt different. Tainted by the map. Every distant sound was a potential threat. Every shadow a sign. Lakota remained silent, a rock beside me, but I felt the tension in him, the ancient grief of seeing the inevitable. We reached the edge of the civilized world, or what passed for it, a small town, a train station. It felt alien after months in the wild, strange faces, loud noises, the air thick with unfamiliar smells. Where did we go? What did we do? We had chosen our path, together. But that path had been drawn on land already claimed. We stayed near the town, hidden. Lakota, despite his silence, seemed to know what he was doing. He traded furs he'd gathered for supplies, watched the people, learned the rhythms. I felt the stirrings of life within me, a tiny counterpoint to the fear. How could I bring a child into this? Into a world that chased you, claimed you, erased you with lines on a map? One damp afternoon, huddled in a makeshift camp in the woods near the railway line, the whispers returned stronger than ever. Not just in my head, all around, murmuring voices, a strange rhythmic pulsing sound. The air grew heavy, disorienting. Lakota reached for me, his presence sharp with alarm. And then the world dissolved. It wasn't like falling asleep or fainting. It was like the reality I was in, the smells of damp earth, the feel of Lakota's hand, The sound of distant train whistles just peeled away, like paint flaking off a wall, faster and faster, leaving white, a blinding, sterile white. And the pulsing sound grew louder, insistent. My eyes snapped open, blinking, trying to focus. Not on the prairie, not on the woods, on a ceiling, white, seamless, too bright. And above me, faces, blurry at first, then sharp, looking down. Men, in dark coats. One face stood out, older, cold eyes behind spectacles, a neat beard. Dr. Klein. The name arrived in my mind as though it had always been there, just hidden. I tried to move, couldn't. My arms, my legs, restrained, strapped down, on a narrow cot. Cold metal touched my skin, wires, tubes, machines surrounding me, beeping, pulsing. The sound that had followed me, now here. Panic seized me. What was happening? Where was I? Where was Lakota? I thrashed against the restraints. "Let me go! Where is he?" My voice was hoarse, unused. Dr. Klein leaned closer. His expression was fascinated, like studying an insect. "Subject C is agitated," he said, his voice calm, clinical. Not to me, to the others. "Terminate sequence 7B. Prepare for standard post-hypnotic assessment." "Subject C?" I whispered, confusion overriding the panic for a second. He smiled faintly. "Yes, Clara, you performed admirably. The stress stimuli response was exceptional this cycle, particularly the Ambrose manifestation and the military encroachment sequence." He spoke about my life, my escape, my love, my terror, as if they were variables in an equation. Stress stimuli, sequences, my world. A performance? "Lakota!" I cried, trying to lift my head. "Where is he?" Dr. Klein gestured to one side. Another cot. Restraints. More machines. And there, Lakota. Strapped down, silent, eyes closed, pale, wires connected to his temples, to his chest. He wasn't moving, not responding. "Subject T is exhibiting deep catatonia," Dr. Klein said, writing on a clipboard. "The prolonged exposure seems to have intensified his baseline state. We are exploring methods to re-establish external stimulus response. Deep catatonia, subject T, Lakota. Was he gone? Trapped? Was everything, the running, the planes, the shared thoughts, the child, was it all just a dream, an experiment?" I stared at him, strapped down, silent in this cold, white place. All that wild strength, all that ancient knowing, reduced to subject T in deep catatonia. Tears streamed down my face, scalding hot against my cold skin. The freedom, the choice, the love. It had all been a mirage, conjured by machines and cold, calculating minds. And I was trapped again. Not by a father or a husband, but by progress, by science, reduced to a subject. The days blurred into white walls, clipped voices, and machines that never stopped humming. They called it the Frontier Simulation Project, a test of how far the human mind could go when stripped of everything but instinct. Lakota never woke. They labeled him unrecoverable, a failed subject. But me? I was stable, adaptable. I'd formed alternative communication pathways, responded well to trauma, thrived in isolation. Their words, not mine. I wasn't sent back to the life I fled. That world, my father, Ambrose, felt like another simulation. Instead, I was processed, repurposed, used. My knowledge of the dream frontier made me useful to survey teams pushing west. Years passed. Progress marched on, carving up land that once felt sacred. Then came the assignment: oversee construction of a new military fort. Coordinates, logistics, familiar ground, too familiar. The land recognized me before I recognized it. The spirit plains, the valley, our home. They laid stakes where we once built dreams. Concrete poured over the memory of firelight and whispered vows. I stood on the spot where he once held my hands, now marked for a barracks wall. The wind moved through the grass like it used to, but there was no voice in it, no presence, just dust, just silence. Lakota, gone. The child? Never real, just a line of code. Everything we were had been measured, tested, and erased. I stood on the raw, exposed earth, the concrete foundation cold beneath the soles of my practical modern boots. The site where our fire had burned, now marked for a barracks wall. The setting sun bled across the sky, just like that first night. The wind tangled my hair, but it carried no voices, no dreams, just silence. I was no longer Clara Montgomery, the runaway bride, or the wild woman of the plains, or Subject C. I was like functional, a part of the machine I had tried to escape, overseeing the paving over of my own heart. I looked out at the vast, empty space where our future should have been, the place where he said our child would never have to run. My throat was tight. My eyes burned not with tears, but with a dry, aching emptiness. I took a deep breath, the dust filling my lungs. And for the first and only time, not in a dream, not in my head, but out loud, my voice small against the vastness, against the ghosts of progress, I whispered his name. Lakota. The wind carried it away. There was no answer. Only the silence of the land, now claimed, measured, and soon fortified. My path hadn't led to freedom. It had led here, to stand on the ruins of the only true thing I had ever known and whisper a name into the wind that couldn't hear.